we recognize that, oh, when I'm in that situation, this is how I feel. What do I need right now? It's best to go into the labyrinth or meditation without a goal.
It's almost like really giving yourself a chance to go inward.
I think it's having the permission to take that pause. Autopilot is the lack of choice. It's just barreling forward. I worry about people who always find cause outside of themselves. If every 8-year-old learned to meditate, we would have a much more loving and nonviolent world.
Hello, and welcome to the Positive Development Podcast. My name is Bart Colen, and this is my co-host, Dante Ciolfi.
Hi there.
The Positive Development Podcast explores the shift from sustainable development's frequently cautious approach of do less harm to positive development's more forward-leaning and optimistic approach of do more good. Each week, we engage with experts from diverse fields, asking questions related to three key principles. 1, a shift in mindset. 2, the practical application of do more good approaches. And 3, the global replicability of such approaches. These questions aim to unearth innovative yet practical ways individuals and organizations can enhance their impact through positive development. Because our aim on the Positive Development Podcast is not only to learn about our guests, it's also to learn from our guests. And finally, we're very aware that we live in a time of a great deal of tension and anxiety. So part of the reason why we created this podcast is to afford you, our viewers, our guests like Anne-Marie and Dante and me as the hosts, a safe place in which it is permitted to be optimistic. So with that, I would like to say a very warm welcome and also a thank you to our guest today, Anne-Marie Emanuelli. And Anne-Marie, if you wouldn't mind just giving us a little introduction of yourself and also maybe as a little tag on at the end to cue us up into some of our questions, just letting us know in general what mindfulness means to you.
All right. Thank you so much for inviting me and welcoming me. My name is Anne-Marie Emanuelli, and I have Mindful Frontiers. We're a benefit corporation that brings wellness to community groups, including schools and organizations and individuals. And we do that through the practice of meditation and mindfulness. I have been practicing meditation personally for a couple decades. And in 2016, I started incorporating it into my school classrooms. I'm a retired educator, and I noticed that young people benefited equally, obviously, as older people in having a moment to just be in the moment and to breathe and to feel their body and basically just be in a situation where they're not being told what to do. And it really helped not to harp on the negativity, but what brought me to bring that to my classroom was that the school where I was teaching had experienced 3 student suicides within the span of a year, year and a half maybe. And it was the first time I had experienced that. So I went into a very deep period of grief. And meditation is what helped me to be able to cope with that suffering. And I realized that if it was going to help me and also the staff at the school, because I brought it into our staff meetings, then I was sure that the young people would benefit from it since they knew those students much more closely than we had. So I don't want to harp on that negativity, but that is the impetus of how I originally brought it into the classroom. And then subsequently, when I retired from teaching in 2020, I decided to found Mindful Frontiers, with the goal to bring mindfulness into other schools, but also to bring it into organizations and individuals as well. So, what is mindfulness? All right. So, mindfulness has a definition that was coined by John Kabat-Zinn, and it's basically to be aware of something on purpose in the present moment without judgment. So, in meditation, we sit and we focus on whatever's going on, but we choose something to use as our anchor. And that's the mindfulness part. So, breath, sound, sensation. I hope I haven't given away too much already, but there you go. I'm pretty passionate about it. So,
Well, that's fantastic. Oh, thank you. We appreciate that.
Yeah, I especially appreciated you sharing the impetus. And as hard as it was to hear, I can just hear the passion in your voice about it, Anne Marie. And I mean, take us back to that real moment when you decided to make it a career choice. Like, what was going on in your mind at that
mhm.
very second? You mentioned the three suicides, but can you talk a little bit about what happened emotionally to you?
Yeah. Well, originally, I mean, when I first heard of those very sad, and two of them incidentally were right before the start of the school year. So we started that particular school year in just a real grief, everyone. And without going too much in detail, I felt that our administration had not really supported the teachers. They really wanted to support the students, but they hadn't thought about the grief that the teachers were experiencing. And I had a hard time coming to work without crying every day and staff meetings. I was in a real state of grief. And then I remembered my meditation practice and decided I need this. I'm not going to be able to work this year if I don't have some kind of emotional support. And meditation was what I remembered had helped me many years before when I had a health issue. And so I brought it back. And then I don't remember the exact moment that I decided to bring it into the classroom, but it just, maybe it was like in a dream or at night, or, sometimes we have these messages or we think of something, at the most in an odd time. And I just decided I'm going to give this a try. And so at the time, I was not certified, and I just got it downloaded an app on my phone, and I brought it into the classroom, and I said, "Hey, guys, we're gonna start class with 5 minutes of mindfulness. Let's do this together. Let's, check it out. Let's try it." And I just would do that with them. Maybe not even 5 minutes. At the beginning, it was probably 1 minute. We worked up to it, and then I actually ended up using it as part of my curriculum. I was an English language arts teacher, and so I started actually clandestinely making them learn about it and having them journal and write about it. And I just felt like, oh, this is my curriculum. I'm just going to use mindfulness
Mm.
in every aspect because that I felt that the students really needed it. Social emotional learning, that is just so important for young people, and have a safe place where they can just chill, really. I mean, that's what you tell them. You just say, "Hey, we're just gonna chill for a minute," you know? And, um, and then as far as the career side of it, when I saw that the students really were, um, connecting with it, and I wasn't originally at the first year, I didn't have, or actually about 2 years, I didn't have any pushback. So I thought, "Wow, this is pretty cool." So then I started finding, workshops, and there was a school, well, actually an organization in Oakland, California called Mindful Schools, and they were offering online courses and certification. So I started attending courses with them, and so I got some certificates that way. And then when I retired in 2020, I just decided that's my passion. That's what I want to do. And then I signed up for a program, I guess you call it, so many hours. I think it was like a 520-hour program for to get the credentials,
Mm.
to be able to say I'm a meditation leader, So yeah, that's is that
Well,
does that answer does that answer your question?
it absolutely answers it perfectly. And it's so powerful the way you explained the mindset shift you underwent because you literally said, okay, I'm just doing it.
I'm just
I'm
doing it.
bringing
I need
this
yeah.
into the class. And it's kind of that power of now thing. And Bart
Mhm.
and I are big on that, right, Bart?
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, you feel it. You just know this is what I got to do, right?
Well, yeah, absolutely. There is kind of an inner knowing there. And it leads me to a question I hadn't anticipated asking, but I'd be curious to see what you think about this and to see to what degree you feel it overlaps with not only your experiences, but the experiences of the students in school, and then also the people, that you're working with now in your business. I was listening to an audiobook of Neville Goddard the other day, and the first line of the third chapter was this, and it really hit me like a ton of bricks. It was, man's chief delusion is his idea that there are causes outside of himself. And what I took that to mean, and I can say this pretty safely because I'm familiar enough with his work, is that ultimately, I guess it's kind of a Viktor Frankl thing of everything ultimately comes back to how we perceive things. We always have that choice, and it's a choice most people aren't even aware of a lot of the time, that, you know, we have the choice to choose how we view things and how we respond to things. Does that resonate with you, and has that been part of the mindset shift you've seen in yourself and others as part of this work?
Yeah. Well, meditation is primarily a personal practice. And it's something that when we sit in meditation, we're really in the moment, we're just aware of what is going on. I would say primarily within ourselves because we may be following the breath. Um, and we're not trying to process the past or even consider the future. Um, John Kabat-Zinn, his program was mindfulness-based stress reduction. That was back in the 70s, and he used it in a medical setting. And he found that mindfulness helped patients that had pain and emotional difficulties to be able to handle what was going on in their bodies and in their minds. And so, I hope that I'm understanding what your question is. I was very not triggered, but when you said that you had read about outside causes for our, I guess, discomfort or whatever. In meditation, we don't, we there's the four noble truths, and that is that there is suffering, there's a cause of suffering, and then there's path to alleviate suffering, and then the eight noble truths is where we learn about mindfulness and right speech and right um, actions and so forth. So we're really talking about how do we show up and how do we handle what's going on. And it's not about, uh, I mean, there's always going to be stuff going on. We
Mm,
can't control it. So
mhm,
who and what can we control is ourselves and our response.
mhm.
And
Y
in
y
meditation, that's what we learn to do.
Right. Yeah, and that's part of the reason why that quote hit me so hard,
Yeah.
because he's saying that, you know, to focus on your own attitude and all of that kind of stuff, and to not get sidetracked by all of those externalities, because I know so many of the things that I'm doing right now, including doing this podcast, that came about solely because of something within me, not a reaction to external things going on. And even as aware as I am of external things, it's realizing, okay, every time I encounter one of those things, I am at a choice point.
Mhm.
I have the choice of how I choose to respond to those things. And that's why I'm choosing to do my best. You know, we're all human, but choosing to do my best to respond to whatever is going on as positively and constructively as possible. So I'm pleased to hear that that seems like it corresponds very well with your mindset and the kind of work that you
Absolutely.
do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of the suffering in the, uh, I believe, and Buddhism would also agree that much of our suffering is it's external, but it's how we respond to it that causes us the suffering. So, and then in Buddhism, there's the concept of equanimity where you can actually be in a situation that's difficult. And like you said, it's how do you respond by deciding to either, I mean, we can't change what's going on outside. We just can't. So who can we and what can we do? We just figure out how to, the mindset, we decide to our perspective and how do we relate and how do we answer or how do we communicate? Yeah. I feel
And
sorry.
Anne Marie,
I worry about people who always find cause outside of themselves for how they're feeling. I have compassion for that, but it's a slippery slope.
It's I relate to what you're saying because part of the reason why it is distressing for me to see a lot of that is because, you know, I've been there. I've spent almost my entire life being in that space. And it's only now that a lot of this material over the years that I've been exposing myself to has really sunk in. And I do notice that difference that it can be, it can be inwardly, it can be inwardly focused, uh, which is fantastic. It's very empowering in that way.
correct me if I'm wrong, Anne Marie, but a lot of the teachings in Buddhism also involve non-attachment. So there's nothing implicitly wrong with thoughts coming into our consciousness that are hardcore negative, but how are we reacting? Are we attaching to that thought? Or
Mhm.
that's probably not even a problem either, attaching, but dwelling and making that one's reality for extended periods
Mhm.
is kind of a source of disharmony or unhappiness. And I guess the sister of that is being comfortable with impermanence. And I remember you brought that
Yeah,
out in one of your videos on your
right.
website.
Yeah. That's a hard one for a lot of people. The fact that everything around us is subject to change and it is impermanent. On the other hand, the positive side to that is that everything is impermanent. So suffering is impermanent, and we can, through meditation, we can feel the suffering when we're in pain, when we're sick. We can really feel it. I mean, it's real. We feel it, but to know that this too will pass at some point, or we figure out how to not, like you said, attach, not to grasp and identify with the pain and know that the pain is not, hmm, oh, this gets really deep. It's not who we are. It's not really who we are, just like our thoughts are not who we are. Like
The idea of don't believe everything you think.
yeah, definitely don't be, never believe anything you think.
Right.
It's probably
Right.
safer to say that.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So in terms of being more present with, as you were saying before, just being present in that moment, that is a powerful mindset shift.
Yeah.
And not just for people, but also in relation to how we approach the wider world. How has that, how has that worked in your work? Because I think a lot of times what can happen, and I had this misconception for a long time was that these practices were just done, you know, in an ashram-like setting for an hour a day, and then you just go out and live your normal life. But it's actually about integrating it into your life if it's going to have any value when you find yourself in situations when you're being triggered.
Right.
It's when these things are most difficult to do
Absolutely.
that they're most important. And I'm just curious to know a little bit
Yeah.
about your experience with that and your own evolution in terms of relating to that idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll be vulnerable and I'll say I have PTSD from childhood trauma. And I know firsthand what it feels like to be hijacked, the amygdala being hijacked by fight, flight, or freeze. And that's generally a reaction, of our brain, a reaction of trauma to a situation and losing ourselves to it. So in meditation, we we can work with those difficult emotions and difficult experiences. And what we do is we recognize that they're real. I mean, they feel real. And the pain might be real. The suffering is real. But we can acknowledge it, see it, but again, not dive in and let it take over. So we do practices where we feel the pain or the suffering, acknowledge that it's there, and then we go into the body because we want to come out of the mind. We want to disconnect ourselves from the thought process because our thoughts will make up stories and attribute meaning to the pain or judgment. And so if we go in or inward and say, well, where do I feel that pain? What does it feel like? And then acknowledge that it's there. Oftentimes it will dissipate because really what it wants is our attention.
That's so true.
Was there anything else that I needed to touch on that I didn't quite get there?
No, no, it's just a very, it's such a different
Yeah,
way of approaching things from the way that particularly we in the West have been trained to
yeah.
approach things, where it is so externally focused and
Mhm.
externally driven. And it's, if you get too caught up in it, and again,
Right.
I've lived almost all my life that way, I
Yeah,
know that
yeah.
you just become a victim because anything that
That's
is
exactly what it is. Mhm.
right, it's a victimhood because, and we don't realize that it's
You don't
happening, but
realize it, yeah.
anything external to you that, people say, "Oh, you made me feel this way."
Right.
Uh,
No, actually,
I'm not so
and
sure about
yeah,
You
all of that.
chose to feel that way.
or
Yeah,
or like in nonviolent communication, we say, "When this happens, I feel."
yeah,
Now, that's not saying that it made me feel or that there's something wrong with my feelings because everybody has feelings and needs, but we just say, "When that happens, this is how I feel." So in a way, we're disconnecting from well, it's personal, but it's not personal. Like, we don't jump into it, like you say, as a victim. We recognize that, "Oh, when I'm in that situation, this is how I feel. What do I need right now?" And then I can address what do I need and actually do something about it rather than staying in that victim place. Meditation helps us to do that because in meditation, we are training ourselves to observe what's going on, just observe it. Um, and we can bring it into our everyday life because the more we practice this idea of observing from in a detached way, we can recognize things that are going on and saying, wow, that person is really wound up. I'm observing this, this behavior without actually going into it with them.
mhm.
Right, and then it's easier to step away from it and to be again, to be have that equanimity about it. This is happening right now. Wow. Okay, I can feel myself I can feel the churning in my body, or I can feel my breath getting quicker. What do I want to do about it? I have a choice.
And there's such a big in my own experience. Obviously, I don't have the breadth or the depth of your experience, but for me, has really taught me a lot about compassion, because in viewing and experiencing those things within myself and being able to step out of myself a little bit and almost view myself externally and see how I'm responding to being triggered and all those things, it does make me just naturally more compassionate, because I
Yeah.
realize that other person is getting wound up for a
Mhm.
reason. And
Yeah.
it's usually a pretty deep-seated
Mhm.
reason that does often go back to childhood traumas and
Mhm.
all these things. And that's why I don't really take offense to anything, because
Right.
in order to take offense to something, you have to take it personally.
Mhm.
But I just see that happening as this person's doing it because of their own reasons, and I just happen to be in the way. But
Right.
it's not personal in that way. Does that
Right.
make sense?
Yeah. It's healthy to do it, to see it that way. Um, yeah, it's a lot more healthy, even if the behavior that it is external is directed to us. That's when it's harder. I mean, we if we're just observing it, that's one thing, but if someone is yelling at us, right, that makes it a little bit harder because it triggers our emotions. But we still can, with practice, notice that this person is yelling and kinda turn it around and say, and almost looking at it as if it's a movie. "Wow, this person's really wound up. I wonder why. Well, maybe they need compassion. Okay, so may they be well, may they, um, may this pass, may this too can pass." So there's a little bit of a separation that meditation helps us do, and it's that Viktor Frankl quote, which, of course, I can't remember the exact wording right now, but it has to do with the pause.
Pause.
In
Yeah.
that moment of pause, we take a breath and we have the choice of how we will respond rather than react, right? Respond rather than react. And that's powerful, but it's also hard. So that's why it's a practice. We have to
Right.
practice this. It's something that we're not taught. We can be taught, and that's one of the things
Hmm.
I'm want to do with Mindful Frontiers is teach these practices to families with children. But we don't learn. We don't grow up learning how to handle things like this.
No, we're not taught that, but it's interesting that you bring up the Viktor Frankl quote, because I think it's something about how in between
Mhm.
the stimulus and
Yes.
response,
Yes.
there's a space
There's a
there.
space, and in that
Yeah,
space is the freedom to choose.
it's
Yeah,
the freedom to choose. And a
yeah.
lot of times, and like you say, we're not taught
We're not taught.
that there is that, not only that you have a choice in that space, we're not even taught that there is a space. It's someone does something and I'm going to immediately react.
Right. Or we're told, in the case of men, not to respond emotionally, not to allow your
Hmm.
emotions, which is detrimental. But,
Yeah.
yeah, because everyone will react. Um, we naturally respond to things. I mean, we are affected by things. We're human.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
um, we're not robots.
No, but it's interesting. It's good, rather, that you emphasize the fact that it's a practice, because I was speaking with a very close family member the other day about a difficult situation in which it seemed, from my perspective, that basically zipping it would probably be the most productive course of action to take. And this person was saying that's difficult. I said, well, of course it's difficult. I said, but the thing is, when you see how well these initially difficult practices work, you think, well, actually, that was well worth the effort. I'm going to try to do the same thing next time. And it gets easier and easier, and it
It
can
does.
become reflective. So
Yeah.
I think it's important to emphasize, and I don't mean to speak for you. I feel like I'm putting words in your mouth, but at least from my experience, I want to encourage people to know that it's not a constant uphill struggle. You do
Yeah.
get better.
You
It
do get
becomes
better.
more automatic. It becomes easier for you, becomes more rewarding for you to do these things.
Well, because our brain is there's a term they use, the plasticity of our brain, and that myth that you can't teach an old dog new tricks is really not true. You can. You the dog can, doesn't matter how old we are. It might take longer, but we can learn, and at
Hmm.
any age we can learn. And
Hmm.
so the practice of it is really important because just like sports, Dante, remember? In order to get better at our in our athletic experiences, we have to practice. We have to get out there and put one foot in front of the other. So any of this type of work, mindset, um, emotional intelligence, and meditation, it all takes practice. Where
Mm,
nobody's born as to enlightened.
And that's what I love about your organization, Mindful Frontiers, the B Corp that it is that the focus is on practical application,
Yeah.
which, as you know, a lot of it is derived from Thich Nhat Hanh,
Mhm.
who you're super familiar with,
I love him.
um, and known as the father of mindfulness.
Yeah.
And the thing that struck me most when I dug into this a bit, Anne Marie, is that the practical application. And I'm just curious, your practice involves some real heavy duty stuff. Is there a particular client of yours that sticks out in your mind that their struggles so profoundly turn them around through the
Um,
practice of mindfulness? I'm curious.
yeah, well, actually, it's interesting that you mentioned that. Yesterday, I led a client in a an hour and a half little workshop. She wanted to bring meditation into her life and had tried and had gotten apps. And there's a myth that really makes it hard to learn to meditate, and that is somewhere along the line, it has been said that when you meditate, you're supposed to not think. And that's absolutely a myth. You cannot stop the mind from thinking. But what meditation does is
mm,
kind of, I don't want to say trick the mind, but it gives the mind something to think about. And those are called our attention anchors. And that's the breath and sound and sensation. And that's the part that benefits hugely from the practice, is the more you do those practices of stopping, noticing your breath, noticing your body in space. And Thich Nhat Hanh, you're right. He is the father of I guess you would say modern mindfulness, because he spoke of mindfulness can be done anywhere, anytime. Anything you do, you can do with intention and focus. And that's the point. So I'm going back to this person from yesterday that I led in this little mini workshop. And at the end of the workshop, I said, "So how did this feel? How did this resonate?" And I lead clients into different types of meditation. There's so many different ways to train the brain to focus. And I actually noticed that she got a little teary-eyed, which touched me. It meant that I had reached her.
it's a good sign.
I reached her, and of course, it's a professional situation, so she didn't want to, let that go further, but I noticed that I had touched something, and I think that what I touched was letting her know that she's not perfect, nobody is perfect, and meditation is a practice that anybody can do, and you just give up trying to be perfect. You just be yourself in the moment, and I think that's what touched her. I'll also just really quickly, I remember a student who was, on the autism spectrum, and not to get into that very in detail, but there's an inability to really be in touch with the body when you have that in neurodivergent, condition, or however we say that appropriately. But I was asking students one time, "So what do you like about this thing that we're doing together?" And he spoke up and he said, I really like having a moment that I can just relax." And I'm like, "Oh, man,"
Mm,
you know,
mm,
from the mouth of
mm,
babes. I mean,
mhm.
don't we all just want to have a moment to relax? And he
Powerful.
obviously hadn't had very many of those opportunities, right? Because in school, constantly being told what to do. You've got a deadline. You need to do. And meditation and mindfulness is actually about trying not to do anything for a little while.
Not just that, but I mean, the internal chemical processes involved with neurodivergence. The mind is constantly going.
Mhm.
What a gift
To tell
to
them,
give
and
that
also to
person.
tell them it's okay. I mean, your mind's going to keep going, but when you notice it, just try to bring it back to the breath 1,000 times if you need to, and
Okay.
eventually it gets easier. Right? But we don't get it right away. We can't just say, "Yep, I'm gonna sit here and I'm gonna, like, not have any thoughts." Give it up. That's not gonna work. So people tell me, "I tried meditation. I can't sit still." Okay, well, then let's walk, right?
You know what's funny, Anne Marie? I was reading, this is not funny, but I was reading about the death of Thich Nhat Hanh, and they wanted to give him a very ornate burial ceremony. And
Mhm.
in his quote unquote will or whatever, he stated very specifically, I don't want anything ornate. If you must do something, think about me as just breath and walking, something to that
Yeah,
effect
he was
in
a
your
he
life.
was yeah, he was, a real proponent of, uh, walking meditation or mindful walking. Yeah.
And that's a part of your labyrinth
Yes.
offering. I don't
Yeah.
know much about that. And if Bart could, accommodate us for a kind of an explanation of that, because that's always fascinated me.
Well, that's also,
Yes,
that's
actually,
part of your the mindset. Yeah, that can help with mindset as well. Absolutely. Yeah.
I was so fascinated on your website, Anne Marie, by the labyrinth exercise, which I assume is part of mindfulness. But could you explain the role of that and
Mhm.
explain to our viewers who may not be familiar with it?
Okay. Well, first I'll say that a labyrinth is like a maze in the sense that there's a path that you follow, but unlike a maze, you can't get lost, and it's not intended to trip you up, like whatever the Greek myth was of the one who Minotaur, yeah. So a labyrinth is this geometric shape that is created in a landscape. And although it's man-made, it fits perfectly into the landscape. It seems like it was meant to be there. And there are geometric designs that we use. There's different kinds of labyrinths. There's medieval labyrinths and classical labyrinths. So anyway, that's sort of the background of it. And they've been in the world for just eons. Labyrinths have been created by different cultures throughout history. And although we don't really know why they were established, like one of the most famous ones is in the Chartres Cathedral in France. On the floor of the cathedral, and we wonder why is there's this labyrinth in a Catholic cathedral? We don't really know. Was it the Cathars or was it? We don't know. But it's there and it attracts people. And there's something about walking this path that starts from the outside and meanders around in a very geometric way, not random, ends up in the center of the shape, and then we come back out. So there's something actually very organic, well, more than organic. I mean, it really connects to I guess, our body, our system, to do this journey that is not random, that is geometric and purposeful. And we're not going to get lost, so we don't have to really think about where we're going. We just follow the path. So that's kind of about a labyrinth and how it fits with mindfulness. It's not traditionally linked, but it definitely is used in mindfulness and meditation, in that it can be a walking meditation, because since you don't have to think about where you're going, you just follow this path, and when you get to the center, you can either stay there. In the case of my labyrinth, I made it the center bigger so there'd be a bench so I can actually sit there for a while. And then when you're ready, you come back out. So they talk about a labyrinth as a journey within. So as you're going to the center of the labyrinth, you could feel as if you're going into yourself.
Hmm.
Um,
It's symbolic.
there's a symbolic symbolism to it. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. And there's something about the circular shape of it that has a very soothing energy. Um And, there's so many people love labyrinths. People love labyrinths. There's a whole labyrinth movement in the United States, and I got certified through an organization named Veriditas that's out of San Francisco. And, apparently the woman who started Veriditas brought the whole concept of labyrinths back to the West, or to the United States. And so there's labyrinths everywhere. They have an actual locator on their website where you can, let's say you're traveling, you can say, "Oh, I'm going to, Washington, DC, where is there a labyrinth?" And people just go and they walk them, you know? Um it's just a very soothing way to, go within, I guess, and it's movement, right? So, for people who can't sit in meditation, they can walk, and they're directed through the path, so they don't really have to think about where they're gonna go, so they can go inward.
Metaphor of going inward
Mhm.
is interesting, and also what's
Yeah.
interesting to me, Anne Marie, is sorry, I keep hitting my mic. Uh, Italian, gotta talk with his hands.
Yeah.
No,
Maybe that's a
it
metaphor too.
but, it fascinates me because a lot of physicists feel that mathematics and spirituality are so inextricably intertwined, and
Yeah,
I'm wondering if there's something mathematical
probably.
about labyrinths that
I will
ties in.
I'm not I'm that's, there's a Deepak Chopra talks about the quantum physics and how that there's a real spiritual side to it. I'm not really, um I haven't studied that. So I can't really speak, appropriately to that, but definitely, there's definitely a geometry, which would be a mathematics to it, and, yeah, because it's actually very structured. These different types of labyrinths, the designs are very specific. Um, so I would agree with you that there's some kind of spiritual math going on, for sure.
How long did the one you created take you? Because what's its approximate dimensions? It's like 10 feet by 10 feet or
No, it's
more.
much more than that. I would say the diameter is like 30 feet or 35 feet. Mine is called a 7-circuit classical. So just using that terminology, you can do a Google search or any kind of search and see what that particular design looks like. It's a simpler one to do in a home situation. The one that's at Chartres is called an 11-circuit medieval, much more complicated. Definitely math involved in that one for sure. Um, yeah. Yeah, and it took us, it didn't take that long, but it took me 3 years to get the nerve, to, like, get the courage to, like, go and do it, and then it took us an afternoon to clear the sagebrush, and I was not doing a very good job, so Bruce got an axe, and he went out there and started, clearing the sagebrush, but then he left one, which is great. He left one in there, and so it's on one of the paths, and then over the course of about 2 summers, I would actually go walking, and I would pick rocks and bring them home in a backpack. So, of course, I was getting a great workout. That was like, "Yeah, man, I have to carry these rocks back home. This is awesome." And I just kept picking rocks and bringing them home and putting them to line the path. And then I would go places like to a cross-country meet with Bruce, and I'd go walk off and pick rocks, and I
Hmm.
still pick rocks.
Hmm.
I'm still bringing home rocks because they kinda get, through the weather and the climate and the what do they call that? The up and down of humidity. some of the rocks get absorbed into the soil, so then I have to put new ones on top. So, um, yeah, you'll have to look at I do have pictures of it on my website. So if
Yeah, that's where
anybody's
I saw it.
curious
I saw
curious
yours.
about what it looks like, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I hope
And
everyone.
when I have people come and walk the labyrinth I like to do it at the change of season, like the equinox or the solstice. I have a pile of rocks and I tell them pick a rock. And then as you're walking, you decide where you want to leave that rock. Don't make a plan. Just wherever you're called to leave that rock, place it on the path, or I mean on the sides of the path. And
Right.
I like that. I like that people who come become involved somehow energetically. I
And
like
it's
that a lot.
intuitive for them.
Totally intuitive. Yeah. Yeah. No rule. There's no rule at all.
I
You
like
Mm,
that they become part of it.
Yes,
That's
that
cool.
part, I love that part. I love the community feeling of that. Yeah.
Well, we're obviously going to post the URL to your website on our podcast. So if anyone is interested, northern New Mexico, El Prado, correct?
Actually, Arroyo Hondo is where we live.
Arroyo Hondo,
Yeah,
my bad. Yeah.
no worries. Yeah.
there's it's such an interesting thing with that labyrinth concept because when you mention that, well, first of all, you're talking about picking up rocks. I think Carl Jung was a big rock picker
Oh,
upper, so
okay.
you're in good company there.
Okay, good.
You're the
Good.
very
Not
esteemed
weird.
company. But I was thinking about, you mentioned, especially mentioning Chartres Cathedral, because that was a place I don't know if you're familiar at all with Joseph Campbell, but that was a place he loved to go when he was studying mythology and these kinds of things. And I think someone like him would have said, and that's what the whole labyrinth concept got me
Mhm.
thinking of, is that these things, they are symbolic, but they are somehow speaking to
Yeah.
some sort of inner need, some sort of inner longing. And I think in part that also explains why, even though maybe traditional religions in the West are losing their grasp, the kinds of work that you're doing are gaining so much interest, because there's just that basic fundamental
Yeah.
human need to go beyond the strictly material, average, everyday, mundane. There's this internal longing there
Yes.
for something deeper, and that must at some level, that labyrinth must at some level, maybe it just represents, like you were saying, that going in to
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah, I think you've hit on something there. There's a humanness to it. And
Mm-hmm.
and obviously no real dogma about it, no rules.
Mm-hmm.
Um, except, stay on the path, but I mean, that's not a big deal. You just walk on the path.
Right.
Um, and and then there's the freedom. There's this freedom of getting from it whatever you intuitively connect with. There's no expect in meditation also, that's one of the things that's beautiful about meditation as well, is there is no expectation. In fact, it's best to go into the labyrinth or meditation without a goal. And I do think that people want that freedom. They want that heart-centered. It's kind of heart-centered, right? Just just allow what's going to happen. Just walk.
The metaphor is so profound. I know we've said it already, but I'll say it again, that metaphor of walking through life
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and just
Absolutely.
walking.
just walking. Because we're not in control of the destination anyway.
It's almost like giving, I guess I would say, your subconscious mind a
Right.
chance to, really giving yourself a chance to go inward, because I find in my life that, and I'm really on the verge of one of these seasons right now because I desperately need it, where just 2 to 4 weeks of doing nothing to give my subconscious mind time to percolate. And I find that that particular time itself is not profoundly creative, but the period of time coming out of that
Mhm.
is immensely creative, because I'm not just going. And that's such, I mean, and this does kind of go into practical application. It's such a hard thing to permission from the external world just to unplug
Yeah.
and to not be go.
Mhm.
You know, the idea of downtime is
Yeah.
almost like I don't know, it's almost seen as vaguely treasonous in our kind of society.
It
And it's a
is.
real shame because there's so
It
much that
is.
goes lost.
Yeah, and Thich Nhat Hanh, again, to get back to that master, on in his monasteries, there's something where they ring the bell at random times during the day. And so wherever you are, whatever you're doing, when you hear the bell, the practice is to stop and take a few breaths and just notice where you are, and then make a choice of proceeding. And so what I hear you saying when you say the permission to do nothing, it's huge. The permission to do to do nothing in the sense of just stopping in order to have that pause that you then can make the choice, right, to proceed, in or the freedom to choose, as we were talking about earlier. That's huge. Because autopilot is an absolute lack of that. Autopilot is the lack of choice. It's just barreling forward. And therein is the mindset that if we're barreling forward, we're not really able to make that choice of how to respond, right?
It's
Was
blank.
a Go ahead, Dante.
No, go ahead, Bart.
I was just going to say, it reminds me of, oh, it had been some years ago now, but a friend of mine sent me an article called The Busy Trap.
Mm,
And what the guy was saying in there was that in the West, particularly in the United States, we have this idea where being busy is worn as such a badge of honor.
hmm.
And this guy was saying how perverse that was. And he
Yeah.
said at one point, which I really loved this, he said, I'm pretty sure that if your job was not being done by a small furry animal in a Richard Scarry book, it's probably not that important. You can take a pause. I thought, oh my God, that's great.
Yeah. Oh gosh, so many people wear that badge of busyness and doing, 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 right? It's
Mm.
yeah, that productivity, but we can be so much more productive in a sense if we can stop and breathe and make a choice of where
See that, but those breathing and making choice and stopping are productive in a
yeah,
paradoxical way because it's
paradoxically, yeah.
rejuvenating. And I mean, it's part of the zeitgeist of a lot of European cultures I've noticed. Like even my Italian culture, there's a part of it called la dolce far niente.
Yep. Sweet
You know that saying,
laziness,
the
the sweet
sweetness of
laziness.
doing nothing.
Mhm.
So good.
And yeah, and in those Mediterranean countries, they have the siesta or the sieste in French, that like 2 or 3 hours in the middle of the day. Americans go crazy. What do you
Yeah.
mean? The stores are
Yeah.
closed for 3 hours. Wait a
Hmm.
minute. Yeah, how about just enjoying la joie de vivre, you know? Yeah, we need that. But well, we could get into so much about the reasons for that, but yeah, encouraging people to just stop, right?
Mm.
And it's not
I
like it's not like they have to quit their job or anything.
No, no, not at all. I
Just
mean,
breathe.
I heard, and this is the last I'll say on it because again, we could go into the rabbit
Yeah.
hole, so
Yeah.
many layers. We could go into our own labyrinth of this, which we are in a way, which is kind of great. Uh, but I recall hearing John Cleese talk about his process of doing things like meditation and psychotherapy. And he said the consequence of it was that it made him less productive, but more creative. In other words, he didn't feel impelled to satisfy some inner emptiness by feeling like he had to be productive all the
Mm,
time. But when he
mm,
was doing stuff, he was more creative. I thought,
mm.
wow, that's pretty good.
That's pretty good. Yeah, we could really go deep with that. The um, productivity versus creativity. We could turn
Mm.
like, but even without getting, because that's still talking about doing. I think just encouraging people to have moments in their day to take a breath, 3 breaths. There's a practice called 3 breaths where you just on your, we have these phones now, right? Where there's all these apps and things that we can do. There's one where it rings a bell once every hour. Bell comes on and you just stop and take 3 breaths.
Do you see that not only in your own life and your own experience, but in the people that you've worked with? Do you see the positive benefits of those things for them? I guess you could say on a day-to-day practical level.
Yeah.
And what are some of those benefits and transformations even that you've seen, even if only in yourself?
Yeah. Well, in general, the benefit is what you said earlier about the being more creative, being more present,
Mm-hmm.
being more intentional with our time. And it's interesting that by pausing and taking those 3 breaths, we have that freedom to choose whether we just barrel ahead or pick a different path, right? Which brings out the creativity in that moment. So people that I have worked with, what I think the biggest, like the woman yesterday, I think it's having the permission to take that pause, right? That it's okay to find a moment in your day, 10 minutes, where you don't have to really do anything. Now that 10 minutes could be reading a book, if you really need to start slowly weaning your mind from doing, but just the beauty of the giving permission and knowing that you don't have to be perfect and that it will take practice, and so just commit to trying.
Permission to be human.
Permission to be human. Yep.
That permission is the key to it clicked in my mind, Anne Marie, because, and we were talking about KTOW, the radio station where you live. There is a jazz show on Sunday morning you might be familiar with, and I forgot the gentleman's name. What is it that hosts it?
I can't remember his name either.
But he has
Yeah.
this saying, he says something to the effect of, take care of yourself so you can take care of those around you.
Yeah.
And for those, I would imagine, that come into your practice, Anne Marie, that may need permission in their own mind, like, how am I justifying this time for me? Maybe that, I mean, that really clicked for me when I first
Yeah.
heard him say it on the
Yeah.
radio.
Yeah. We need to take the time for ourselves, right? That goes back to what you were saying, Bart, earlier about, it was about, the external suffering, the influence
Mm-hmm.
of what's going on around. We need to start with ourselves, right? We
Mm-hmm.
need to start with the calming our own nervous system.
But I think the call, as we were saying before, the call of so many people, even myself in my own way, to do the kind of work that you're helping people with, it almost seems like it's a built-in self-correction mechanism within the human being that no, 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 you need to embrace that part of your own humanity. It's almost not allowing us to go over that
Mm,
edge,
mm,
which is good that people feel that calling.
mm, mhm. I'm also thinking about, the permission to accept our own, um, needs, the permission to accept that, that we're not perfect, the permission to make a choice that benefits us first, and there's some people call that being selfish, but it's self-compassion, that's really important because you're right, Dante, we can't really serve others until we kind of feel, grounded and feel, some sort of healthiness, I don't know. Again, I don't want anything to be perfection, but really start with yourself. Yeah, that's what the beauty of meditation is we are starting with ourselves, because every moment is what's going on in our own awareness. Although there are other practices that expand that outwards, right? There's metta, loving kindness, and there's
Mm.
Colen, which are compassion practices. Now, those we start with ourselves and then we work our way out and we share with others. But obviously we have to do the practice ourselves first. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, the practice itself, has been its efficacy has been
Mhm.
proven empirically,
Absolutely.
and what I've been curious about, Anne Marie, because you're familiar with mindfulness on national and international level, are there some, um, states and or governments that are more supportive of health programs that promote mindfulness?
I don't have enough information, but wasn't there a country that was in the news some years ago where their national motto or their national purpose was healthiness of their people? I don't remember. It's a
It's
South Asian country.
it was Bhutan. It's the
Yeah,
gross national happiness.
gross national happiness.
Hmm.
Talk about that.
Wow. Wouldn't that be great? Well, brings to mind a quote of the Dalai Lama who said that who has been credited as saying that if every 8-year-old learned to meditate, that we would have a much more loving and nonviolent world. So that's, to me, there's a similarity in there in that if we, if our, if our focus were different, if our focus was more on the human, um, the emotional health of individual people one at a time, practice, 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 we would change our mindset. We would have we would have a society that is less frantic. I mean, can you imagine like just being in a town where you walk around and they ring a bell and you stop? And I mean, that's what I mean, that's what Plum Village Monastery is like. But wouldn't it be interesting if we just like all were given this permission to just stop? Well, I guess the siesta is
Yeah,
that.
I was
Yeah,
just thinking about Greece.
there you
Yeah,
go. That's what it is. That's a
yeah.
cultural permission to stop. Yeah. And obviously, somewhere along the line, it it was proven to be beneficial. So the stores stay open later at night. Um, they still have the opportunity for um, prosperity and um, making money, but they also recognize the importance of having that break, right?
Why couldn't we do it? I mean, I was
I
just
know.
thinking, have a bell in your house. I
Yeah,
mean, and literally have it go off
yeah.
as if you were in a monastery.
Yeah. Well, there's an app. I'm through the Plum Village, Thich Nhat Hanh's Plum Village monastery. They have an app, and you can actually set it to go on once. I don't know what the intervals are, but I have it going off every hour, and I'll
Oh,
admit that sometimes I just turn it off. But I do try most of the time to take that break when I hear the bell, right?
I'm
So,
gonna download that app. Thanks for telling me
yeah,
about that.
It's Plum Village. Plum
Yeah.
Village is the app, and then you go into some setting and you tell it to ring every hour. And it's just a bell. It just goes on, it goes off, no words, nothing, and it doesn't interrupt the day. I mean, it's supposed to interrupt the day, but I mean, it doesn't get in the way.
A lot of times those things that we don't see as interruptions are actually really great. Like I will notice, I'm sure you've noticed this, I'm sure our viewers have noticed this too. I'm sure it's not just me at all, but it so often seems like some of the best ideas and inspirations I have are when it's not very convenient for me to pick up a piece of paper and write them down, and I wish I
Yeah,
could. It's I'm showering or I'm driving. It's
yeah,
because I'm busy. I'm not in my head. I'm busy washing my armpits, or I'm just listening to my music and paying attention to how fast I'm driving. I'm kind of taken out of that
yeah,
overthinking, and it's almost like the mind is able to produce
absolutely.
those ideas during those pleasantly mundane moments.
Well, I think that makes me think of the the benefit of the power nap, where you
Hmm.
take a nap, you know. And
Yeah.
I remember in college, I was an art student. I remember would sometimes figure out my projects during a nap or overnight or right. I think that's part of that. that downtime.
A variant of that is the Pomodoro technique. Are you familiar with that, Anne Marie, as an
So
educator?
yeah, I'm familiar with
Yeah.
the timer, the Pomodoro timer, but I'm not sure
Right.
if that's what. And for students that have ADHD, they put a timer on to help them stay focused. So I'm not sure where you're going with that. Help me.
Well, I mean, the fact that the mind needs those breaks
Oh,
from mindfulness, or
hmm,
even in an exercise of using the brain to learn something or whatever, it's the concept of studying for an interval. I forgot the recommendation. I think it's 20 minutes. Then the timer goes off,
right.
5 minutes of not doing anything,
Yeah, yeah, you're right.
and
No,
then back.
yeah. Students who have attention issues benefit from chunking their time. Yeah, and we can put that into the concept that we're talking about with a mindset change or a pause for ourselves as well. You're right. Yeah, there is an application. I can see the application to just um, the normal day-to-day activity.
So it was good that you brought up that quote from the Dalai Lama, which I don't think I'd ever heard before, because it brings me to one of the things that I wanted to ask you. The A big part of the positive development concept is the recognition that certainly in the United States we have very clear, very defined, and at this period in history, very hardcore group A versus group B. And they're curiously intertwined because they're so reactive to what the other is doing. And because they're moving horizontally against each other all the time, they can't move forward. And one of the things that we're keen to do, and this is something I'm keen to do in the global scale projects that I'm working on now, is not to take a side, to say that we can be for the positive thing that we want without necessarily having to be in opposition to anyone or anything. It's finding what I call, and I know that Buddhism uses this term, finding a third way between there to move forward in a non-divisive, side-taking way. And that quote seems to really encapsulate that. It's not even fixing the extremes, it's transcending them and almost
Mm.
setting a new model
And
of
your
what is possible for other people. And how do you think, in terms of global replicability, the kind of work you do could help aid people to move peacefully through and beyond these things,
mom.
to set a better example for just a more fulfilling life for people?
So what comes to my mind, and a lot of meditation for me is a fairly simple practice.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I I generally take whenever this question that you're asking me, what goes through my mind is what is a practice that can help us, a meditation practice that can help us to achieve what you're explaining. And the one that comes to mind is has to do with recognizing that we all have the same basic needs. And so when we are in conflict with someone, the practice is to see that person as someone who has the same basic needs, such as needs to be loved or feel loved, needs to feel safe, right? And it's the I can't remember the exact name of the practice. It's just on the tip of my tongue, but it's not. It's very simple. It's like they also want or they also
Mm-hmm.
need. And so
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I suppose if I put it in a practical setting, I would say that we can practice that when we're having discussions or when we're reacting to things that are going on in the world, and to say we all need, we all have basic needs. So, what is that person's basic need at this time? To be heard, to be acknowledged, not, and maybe we can't agree with them. That may not be the need, but the need may simply be to be heard and to be seen and to be acknowledged. So there is a meditation practice where we picture someone with whom we have conflict and we try to strip away the actual conflict and go to the person
Mm,
and recognize that it's called Just Like Me. It just came.
mm.
It's called Just Like Me. They need, and then we come to this some sort of um what is it that we both need in this moment? So
Acknowledging the mutual humanity.
correct, correct. Um, boy, if that was a practice that we learned, wouldn't that alleviate a lot of wars? If you think about
Yeah.
it to that depth, right? This person is, these two countries are at odds with each other. What is it that they actually need? Mm.
Mm. But the influence I noticed just even in small ways in my own life, and they're not so small at that all the time, just the influence of a person who, I guess to speak for myself, is at least attempting as best I can to be that way and to recognize that there's so much more in shared humanity than
Mhm.
there is in the terms of differences. Even the difference to a given environment that that kind of person can make, that's pretty profound. The ripple effect of that, you have no idea necessarily. It could actually end up having a very big impact, or so
Mhm.
I'd like to think.
Yeah. It's hard though in conflict to strip away the what it is that we're upset about or in conflict about and try to get to that common humanity. It's not easy. So again, it's a practice, right?
Mm,
Something that we practice. Um, it
Yeah,
takes
and
practice.
I've seen it manifest among some politicians in
Mhm.
my area, the Washington, D.C. area right now, that they start with that common thing. What do we have in common?
What do
mhm,
we have in common?
And let's address that. And then let's move outward.
Because the how is where I guess the how is where we um, get polarized is how do we take care of? But if we could keep coming back to what is it that we ultimately want, and it's going to be very basic things. It's going to be safety, um, recognition, acknowledgement.
mhm.
Um, yeah, safety is a big one, right? To feel safe.
Yeah, I think that actually, wow, that you really hit something there because I think a big part of all the conflict is that people are feeling very unsafe, and that's what it seems to be to me. And so you grasp at certain things, and I see a lot of people getting maybe more attaching their own identity to their opinions to
Yeah.
a degree that doesn't seem very productive to them, so that when those opinions are criticized, they're taking it as a very direct criticism of themselves. And so I think that grasping for something solid to hold on to uh, doesn't do people a lot of favors, at least in that kind
Mhm.
of
Yeah.
context. The opinions and all of those things become a straitjacket rather than a loosely fitting garment. I don't know if that's exactly the point, but that's what it made me
No,
think
it makes
of.
sense. Definitely
Yeah, I
makes.
mean, what you said, Bart, clicked in me that concept of fear. When someone is afraid,
Mhm.
that can be the catalyst for conflict. And we all see it in wild animals, etc. But cousin Sakis, this Greek philosopher, I'm going to misquote him horribly, but I'll try to quote him. I don't fear and I don't hope. I'm free.
I did have that actually brings up I spoke to someone about hope and actually Pema Chodron, who's a Tibetan monk. She talks about hope is actually catches us in grasping and wanting things to be different. And I remember this person telling me, I don't um I don't get caught up in hoping things will be a certain way. Because again, that's in the future and we have no control over that. That's what's coming to my mind in what you're saying there. And then of course is has brings in the concept of uncertainty, not knowing what's going to happen, and then there's also the fear, the safety, which is survival, right? Fear is how do I survive in this moment? Yeah, there's a lot. And I think anger, it's said that anger is a response to something being unjust, feeling unjust. Um, so these very basic feelings, I guess, in meditation, we would just sit with them. What is it? What is that feeling? What is that feeling? Where do I feel it in my body? And then it becomes tangible. And it's not no longer in the mind as a thought. It then becomes uh, actually located in the body. Where do I feel that anger? And then
Mm-hmm.
can I let it go? Can I,
Mm-hmm.
but, and, so then I think it becomes quite tangible that way. I think that's the practice anyway.
It's
Mhm.
almost
I'm
like
curious, Anne Marie.
it's almost like the game within the game because we think that the surface level things that are happening, the conflict with this person or whatever, that's the full thing. But
Right.
actually,
It's
there are
actually
miles
not.
and miles of
Yes,
ocean of depths
correct.
beneath that in terms of how we're really feeling, what's really driving this, what's really behind this
Yes,
dynamic.
yes.
And it's getting caught on that surface level and all sorts of, uh, you know, unfortunate things and poor decisions
And a lot
seem
of
to
it is
come
up
out of
here.
that.
A lot of it's up here.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And all that. You were gonna say something, Dante.
Yeah, sorry I interrupted,
No,
Dante.
I was mainly curious in your practice, Anne Marie, because these are really globally replicable things. It's what every human experiences. But when you bring a client through meditation and they get it located physically in their body, that point of tension, is it a predictable journey that it can then elevate and go through different phases and then finally
Oh.
the realization in their mind? I remember when my mother did XYZ.
I don't work with that because,
Yeah,
to me, that would be like, psychotherapy, because
right.
again, you're putting your you I when I practice with people, I'm trying to give their mind something safe to focus on rather than asking them to use their mind. So when we're doing a practice where it's identifying the emotion, there's a practice called RAIN. Tara Brach does this one. RAIN, the R is recognize that that you're feeling a certain way. The A is acknowledge, like it's there, right? Not trying to push it away. I is to investigate where it is in the body. So this is what you were talking about, the sensation or attention or something. And then N is the nurturing. So it's that self-compassion of what does that feeling need right now and how can I soothe it or nurture it, right? Or and can also be non-identification. So it could be not trying to analyze it, but just saying, wow, like a child who's hurt, and you just say, oh, that hurts. And sometimes just acknowledging that it hurts, it dissipates because it really just wants to be um, recognized and acknowledged. So that's what comes to mind in the context of meditation. We try, there are practices. And again, it's a practice and we just do them over and over, but we can do them like this one, rain, we can do it on the fly. Oh, I'm angry at someone. Oh, yes, I recognize I'm angry. Yes, it's true. I'm angry. I'm not going to push it away. Investigation. I'm angry because this happened. And then I know it's off. It doesn't feel so great. Let's just breathe for a little bit and let it go. But it doesn't go through the letting go, Dante, isn't a prescribed process. That would be like psychotherapy or something where they say, you know, what we do in meditation is basically bringing awareness to it. And oftentimes by bringing the awareness to it, it, it goes away. It's pretty amazing actually.
It's
Because
like the way, sorry, go ahead.
let me just say, finish with,
Yeah.
they say that a feeling only lasts 90 seconds if we don't assign meaning and we don't assign a story to it. So that's this concept. If you acknowledge it, recognize it, nurture it, give it some love, it will go away. It's when we get stuck there and say, "Oh, I'm mad because he did this, and why did he do that? And I bet the world's coming to an end because this happened." If we don't go there and we just acknowledge that what it feels like, it will go away. It's pretty hard to believe. People will say, "Oh, no," but it really will if we practice enough.
That's amazing. That 90-second thing is amazing.
Yeah. But if you think about times that we've gotten angry or people have been angry around us, if you think about why it kept going, it's because we kept feeding into it,
Absolutely.
putting more, "Well, you are doing this. Well, you this and you that, and
Mhm.
I believe this." And that's all the story, the story, the story. If we just stop and say, "Yeah, that sucks." That really sucks. You know?
Well, and it goes back to that thing of the Neville Goddard quote about not getting caught up in thinking that it's all external.
Yeah.
When people say, "Oh, it's not all about you," and I know what they mean when they say it's not all about you, but ultimately, at a real level, bullshit, it's all about you.
I feel it.
Hmm.
I feel it.
I not only do I feel it, but I'm the one who has the capacity to bring that nurturing to myself, to
That's right.
recognize what's going
That's right.
on, to realize that
Mhm.
this is about my response to it way more than it is about what has happened, and not
And my
adding
belief
layers
in,
to
yeah,
that story.
right, right, the story is huge, right? There's a practice called the 5 conditions that has to do with the story, the last part of it. The 5th condition is the story, and so the idea is that if as we're feeling something, there's different steps. The first 4 is like something happens and "Oh, okay, do I like it? Do I not like it? How does this feel?" The mind starts to say, "Oh, that happened because this." And then if we can mindfully just acknowledge it and not go to that next step, it fizzles out. It has no more power.
It's interesting too,
Isn't
because
it?
it's not just for us. In our relationships with people, people want to be seen. So when tension occurs between people, not just inside a person, it's the same paradigm, isn't it, Anne Marie? I don't
Yeah, it
know.
is. And
Yeah.
that's where that practice, just like me, if you can cut through the, I don't know, the BS
Yeah.
or the thing and say, "Wow, they're just hurting right now," or
Hmm.
"They're really angry," or and you said something, Bart, earlier about there's some reason that they feel that way. Not that we need to know what that is, but just say, "They feel that way because," you know? I remember one time being at the gas station, I had no idea that I took somebody's that they were waiting for that gas pump, and I just happened to take that gas pump. Oh my god, I got yelled at and everything, and I thought, "Oh, man, he just wanted the gas pump. Poor thing, what did he need? He needed to get gas," you know? Instead of being all angry, like, "Well, what's your problem?" or whatever.
Hmm.
Oh, man, he was upset. He needed to get gas because he had to get somewhere or whatever. That's the kind of thing is where you acknowledge it, and then you put a little bit of compassion and usually, we can't control how the other person will react, but usually we can step away and be okay with it. And again,
How did you
bringing it
deal
back
with the
to
gas?
meditation, we have to practice that. We have to practice it for it to really to do it when we need it.
What did you do, Anne Marie, about the gas incident?
Well, I realized it later. I wasn't a guru in the
Oh,
moment. Yeah. But
okay. I got
later
you.
I realized, oh, but in the moment I was like, "Oh my god, he's gonna hit me or he's gonna
Right.
what's gonna happen?" "Okay,
Right.
don't pay attention. Don't pay attention. Just pump your gas. Just pump your gas," right? So it was later. I
I
mean,
got
I'm not perfect. I'm not a enlightened being. I mean, I get caught up in those things too. But I do know that the next time that happens, right? The next time I think I'll react differently or I'll respond differently. Yeah. In the moment I was like, "Oh my God, he's gonna like pull out a gun or something. I don't know what's gonna happen. That's the story. But later I realized, okay, if that happens again, I'm just gonna look at him and go, oh, you poor thing.
Why can't we have stories on the evening news like mindfulness instructor
Yeah.
deals with gas pump in a positive manner today?
Oh, like a reality show, right? One of those
Yeah,
reality shows where
That
you
actually would be
actually
really
use
good.
mindfulness and meditation in a daily practice. Oh my
yeah.
God, instead of the police blotter, it would be some like Thich Nhat Hanh shows up and
That's
and
I
actually a
will
really
tune
good
into that.
idea.
oh, wouldn't that be cool? That would
That's
be
a
really
very
cool.
good idea.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. There's a lot of reasons why.
So it seems like the big takeaway is, at least for me out of this, is is just to let people know that, we do have a choice with these things. We don't have to ride up and down on these waves of what's going on around us or even how we're feeling inside of us. To me, at least, that seems like the big takeaway.
I would say that a takeaway that I think we spoke to is that no one's perfect and that these mindset changes take practice, right? I think that's one of the takeaways. But they're worth it. They're worth it.
Well, if I don't know if anyone else has anything before we'd like to wrap up. Dante, any concluding thoughts? Anne Marie, anything?
I think we
I
solved all the world's problems in this hour and a half. So
There we go.
there you go.
Well, well
No,
done.
we're just all human when we're in this life together, one
Thank
breath.
you. Thank you for being here. I know when I watch this back to go through and do the editing, it's such a great process with every guest, because there are just so many things that I heard the first time, but the more I listen to them, the more I get out of them. And I know that that's going to be the case for our viewers as well. So I just want to thank you again, Anne Marie, for being here. Dante, obviously, as always, thank you for being here and being part of this. To thank our viewers for being here. And until the next time we see each other on the Positive Development Podcast, I will simply say onward and upward.